The unsolved case files of Detective Shernan. Behind the Smile, the Alexandra Reynolds case. Disclaimer: the following story contains sensitive content and is only intended for viewers 18 years and older. All names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. This story is presented for informational and educational purposes only. The content does not constitute legal advice, and viewers should not rely on the information presented as a substitute for professional consultation. Introduction. I've spent 27 years looking into the eyes of killers, some vacant, some calculating, some haunted. But nothing quite prepared me for the case of Alexandra Reynolds. My name is Detective James Shernan, and I specialize in cold cases, the ones other investigators have abandoned or failed to solve. The files that collect dust while families collect grief. And I'm about to share with you one of the most disturbing cases I've ever worked. It was December 2015. Christmas lights twinkled across the London skyline, carols echoed through shopping centers, and families prepared for holiday celebrations. But in one home in Essex, a chair would remain empty on Christmas Day. A present would remain unwrapped. A family holiday to Disneyland would never be taken. What happened to Alexandra Reynolds isn't just a cautionary tale about online dating. It's a stark reminder of how our justice system can fail the very people it's designed to protect. It's about how warning signs can be dismissed until it's too late. It's about a young woman whose sole mistake was believing a man's carefully crafted persona. As I tell you this story, I want you to imagine yourself in Alexandra's shoes, or in the shoes of her parents waiting anxiously on Christmas Eve for a daughter who would never come home. Picture yourself as the investigators piecing together what happened in room 213 of the Millbrook Manor Hotel. Because understanding this case means understanding the darkest corners of human nature. I warn you now, what you're about to hear is disturbing, but it's a story that needs telling, a story that might save lives. So settle in, lock your doors, and ask yourself, how well do you really know the person on the other side of the screen? The victim, Alexandra Reynolds, was 23 years old in December 2015, a vibrant, intelligent, and full of promise. If you'd met her, you'd have been struck by her infectious laugh and boundless energy. She lived with her parents in a quiet neighborhood in Essex, a short commute from London, where she had recently begun her dream job teaching history and politics at a prestigious school. When I first walked into Alexandra's bedroom after her disappearance, I tell you, I was struck by how much life was contained in that small space. Awards for canoeing competitions lined her shelves. Photos from her Southampton University graduation were pinned to a corkboard. Her lesson plans were meticulously organized on her desk. This wasn't just a crime scene I was examining. This was the abrupt end of a life that was just beginning to bloom. Alexandra's friends described her as the glue that held their group together. She was the one who organized birthday celebrations, who remembered anniversaries, who checked in when someone was going through a rough patch. She was fiercely loyal and unapologetically herself. I want you to think about the young woman in your life that everyone adores, I say, leaning forward. The daughter, sister, or friend who lights up a room when she enters. That was Alexandra. Her parents had raised her to be independent but cautious. She was street smart and self-assured. She wasn't naive or reckless. She was simply a young woman navigating the modern dating landscape like millions of others. Alexandra had joined the dating site Connect Match a few months before her death. Like many young professionals, she found that her demanding job left little time for traditional dating. Online platforms offered a convenient solution, a way to meet people outside her immediate social circle without investing too much time up front. When we examined Alexandra's dating profile, I explained, we found nothing unusual. Her bio was witty, but reserved. Her photos were tasteful, hiking in Scotland graduation day, a family vacation in Greece. She was selective about who she spoke to, ignoring crude messages and engaging only with men who seemed genuinely interested in conversation. In November 2015, Alexandra began exchanging messages with a user named LegalEagle92. His profile picture showed a handsome man in his mid-20s with a confident smile and intelligent eyes. He introduced himself as Marcus Bennett. If you're using dating apps right now, I ask, have you ever really verified that the person you're talking to is who they claim to be? Because Alexandra thought she had. The predator, Marcus Bennett, presented himself as the perfect catch. 26 years old, educated at prestigious universities, professionally successful, and socially conscious. His profile mentioned his law degree from Cardiff University, his master's in journalism, and his newly registered legal firm, Bennett Legal Associates. He claimed to have spent a year working for a luxury hotel group in Moscow, spoke fluent Russian, and had connections with London's political elite. The digital footprint Marcus created was impressive, I explained. His social media accounts showed photos of him at charity galas, meeting politicians, including the then mayor of London, and volunteering at refugee centers. He maintained a blog called Ordinary Decent Human, where he posted thoughtful essays about social justice, humanitarian crises, and poetry that demonstrated both sensitivity and intellect. Alexandra was impressed. Here was a man who seemed to share her values, who was professionally accomplished, and who lived conveniently close to her in Hertfordshire. Their online conversations flowed easily. They discovered shared interests in international politics, true crime documentaries, and hiking. Marcus was attentive, asking thoughtful questions about her teaching career and responding with genuine interest to her answers. What Alexandra couldn't have known, I say grimly, was that virtually everything Marcus told her was a carefully constructed lie. When our investigation team began digging into Marcus Bennett's background after Alexandra's murder, the facade quickly crumbled. Yes, he had attended Cardiff University, but he had dropped out after 1 year. He had never received a master's degree in journalism. Bennett Legal Associates existed only as a registered business name. There was no office, no clients, no legal practice. The photos with politicians were real, but taken at public events where anyone could approach for a quick handshake and photo opportunity. The most disturbing aspect of Marcus's deception, I continue, was what it concealed. Behind the charming online persona was a man with a history of violence, particularly toward women. In 2009, at age 20, Marcus had received a police caution for assaulting a girlfriend. In 2014, he had assaulted his own brother during a disagreement, though charges were dropped when his family refused to press the case. Most alarmingly, just 3 weeks before meeting Alexandra, Marcus had been convicted at Bristol Crown Court of threatening to kill 2 women. Those threats weren't vague expressions of anger, I emphasize. They were detailed, graphic descriptions of how he planned to murder and sexually assault his then girlfriend's younger sister. When questioned about these threats, Marcus had asked police, "Why aren't I being locked up for saying these things?" It was as if he knew what he was capable of and was asking for intervention. Despite the severity of these threats, Marcus had been given a 9-month suspended sentence and released. The mental health professionals who evaluated him noted his narcissistic tendencies and his admissions of violent fantasies, but ultimately deemed him a low risk for actually carrying out these threats. I want you to consider this for a moment, I say, my voice heavy. A man explicitly tells authorities he has fantasies about killing women. He asks why he isn't being locked up, and the system essentially pats him on the head and sends him on his way. How would you feel knowing this man was now messaging your daughter, sister, or friend? By the time Alexandra agreed to meet Marcus for their first date, he was simultaneously messaging approximately 20 other women on various dating platforms. He was hunting. The date, December 23, 2015. London streets were crowded with last-minute Christmas shoppers and holiday revelers. Alexandra spent the afternoon preparing for her date with Marcus, trying on several outfits before settling on a burgundy dress with black tights and ankle boots. She curled her hair, applied makeup with care, and texted her friend Olivia about her excitement and nervousness. Looking at Alexandra's phone records, I tell you, we could track her anticipation throughout the day. At 3:14 p.m., she texted Olivia, "What if he's nothing like his profile?" At 4:27 p.m., "What if we have nothing to talk about?" And at 5:58 p.m., just before leaving her house, "Wish me luck. I'll text you later to let you know how it's going." Alexandra told her parents she was meeting her friend Olivia for drinks in London. This small deception wasn't unusual for a young woman still living at home. She likely didn't want to face questions or concerns about meeting someone from a dating site. She promised to be home that night, or to call if plans changed. Think about your own white lies, I suggest. The times you've told someone you were one place when you were actually another. Usually, they're harmless. But in Alexandra's case, this small omission would make it harder for her family to raise the alarm when things went wrong. Alexandra and Marcus had arranged to meet at 7:30 p.m. at a trendy bar called Pulse in Shoreditch, East London. Security camera footage from the bar showed Alexandra arriving at 7:25 p.m., looking nervous but excited as she checked her reflection in her phone camera before entering. Marcus arrived 7 minutes later. The bartender who served them remembered them clearly, I explained. He described Alexandra as bubbly and chatty, and Marcus as quiet but intense. They ordered cocktails and espresso martini for her, a double whiskey for him, and took a table in the corner of the bar. By all appearances, the date was going well. Other patrons noticed them laughing and leaning in close to hear each other over the music. At 8:43 p.m., Alexandra texted Olivia, "He's actually really nice, much better in person than I expected." As the evening progressed, they ordered more drinks, a lot more drinks. Bar receipts showed 4 rounds of cocktails, followed by tequila shots. By midnight, both Alexandra and Marcus were visibly intoxicated. Security footage showed them holding onto each other as they left the bar at approximately 1:45 a.m. Outside the bar, they hailed a taxi. I continued. The driver would later become a key witness in our investigation. He picked them up at 1:52 a.m., with Marcus giving him an address for the Millbrook Manor Hotel in Hertfordshire about 25 miles north of London. The taxi driver, Rajesh Patel, described the couple as extremely intoxicated, with Marcus being particularly worse for wear. During the journey along the A10, the driver had to stop 3 times for Marcus to vomit on the roadside. Twice, Marcus failed to exit the vehicle quickly enough, vomiting inside the taxi. Put yourself in Alexandra's position for a moment, I say. It's late, you're tipsy, and your date is violently ill. Would you continue to a hotel with him, or would you ask the driver to take you home? It's easy in hindsight to question her judgment, but alcohol impairs decision-making, and she likely felt responsible for Marcus in his condition. Upon arrival at the Millbrook Manor Hotel at approximately 3:30 a.m. on December 24th, Alexandra paid the taxi fare of $65 plus an additional $80 cleaning fee for the soiled vehicle. The night receptionist, Ellen Morris, remembered them clearly. Ellen told us that Alexandra appeared drunk but coherent, I explained. She handled the check-in process, paying $115 for the room while Marcus leaned against the counter mumbling, "I shouldn't have had those shots." Ellen provided them with key cards to room 213 and watched them make their way unsteadily to the elevator. At approximately 4 a.m., Alexandra called the front desk requesting toothbrushes and toothpaste, which were delivered to the room. This was the last time Alexandra was known to have communicated with anyone outside that hotel room. What happened next, I say grimly. We've had to piece together from forensic evidence, Marcus's subsequent confessions, and the timeline established by hotel security footage. And I warn you, this is where our story takes its darkest turn. The crime, the events that took place in room 213 of the Millbrook Manor Hotel, represent the kind of brutality that haunts even veteran detectives like myself. Based on our investigation and Marcus's later statements, we believe Alexandra was murdered in the early hours of December 24th, somewhere between 4:15 a.m. and 6 a.m. The forensic evidence tells us that Alexandra and Marcus likely argued, I explain. Alcohol often reveals a person's true nature, and it appears that something in Marcus's demeanor changed once they were alone in that room. Perhaps Alexandra saw glimpses of the man behind the carefully constructed facade. Perhaps she said something that triggered his rage. Hotel guests in adjoining rooms reported hearing raised voices around 4:30 a.m., though none could make out specific words being exchanged. One guest recalled hearing a loud thump followed by silence. Marcus later told investigators with chilling detachment, "She didn't even fight. I expected her to hit out or something," I say, my voice tight with controlled anger. The medical examiner determined that Alexandra died from manual strangulation. The bruising pattern on her neck indicated that Marcus used both hands, applying pressure for at least 3 minutes until she lost consciousness and then died. What Marcus did next demonstrates the truly disturbing nature of his character. Rather than calling for help or fleeing the scene, he remained in the room with Alexandra's body for approximately 6 hours. During this time, forensic evidence indicates that he sexually assaulted her body and took photographs using his mobile phone. "I've investigated many murders over my career," I say quietly, but the level of depravity shown in this case, the complete dehumanization of Alexandra Still, disturbs me profoundly. Ask yourself, what kind of emptiness must exist in a person to commit such acts? At approximately noon on December 24th, Christmas Eve, Marcus prepared to leave the hotel. He wrapped Alexandra's body in blankets from the bed and placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. Security footage showed him exiting his room at 11:57 a.m., then returning moments later with a laundry cart from the hotel hallway. Marcus wheeled Alexandra's body out of the hotel through a service exit, I continue. The hotel's layout provided him with a route that avoided the main lobby and most security cameras. He took her to a secluded area near a dumpster on the hotel grounds, concealing her body in undergrowth approximately 100 yards from the main building. Marcus then returned the laundry cart, checked out of the hotel at the front desk, and called a taxi to take him to his parents' home in Hertfordshire. The receptionist who processed his checkout noted nothing unusual about his demeanor. He paid the remaining balance for the room services with Alexandra's credit card, which he had taken from her purse. Before leaving the hotel, Marcus made one more call, I explained. He contacted another woman, Diana, whom he had been dating simultaneously after meeting her on a different dating platform. When Diana answered, Marcus told her they couldn't see each other anymore because he had killed someone and would be in prison for a long time. Diana, understandably shocked, immediately ended the call and deleted all his contact information. Meanwhile, Alexandra's family was growing increasingly concerned. She hadn't returned home the previous night, hadn't called, and wasn't responding to text messages or phone calls. Her absence on Christmas Eve was completely out of character, especially given the family's planned holiday celebration. By midday, Alexandra's parents had contacted several of her friends, including Olivia, I continue. It was then that they discovered Alexandra hadn't been out with Olivia at all, but had met someone from a dating site. This revelation only intensified their concern. At approximately 3:15 p.m. on December 24th, one of Alexandra's friends called her phone, and to her shock, a man answered. The friend later described the voice as breathless and strange. The man asked her to repeat her name, then whispered Alexandra's name in long, drawn-out breaths before redirecting the call to voicemail. That call, I say, was the tipping point that convinced Alexandra's friends something was terribly wrong. They searched online for information about Marcus Bennett, finding his business registration that listed his parents' home address. Alexandra's father immediately drove there, desperate for answers. When Alexandra's father arrived at the Bennett family home, he was greeted by Marcus's mother. What she told him would confirm his worst fears and change his life forever. According to police statements, Marcus's mother told Alexandra's father that her son had returned home that morning clearly disturbed, making statements including, "I am a monster. I've killed a girl," I explained. She added that Marcus had told her, "I put her in the ground. I wrapped her up in a quilt. I put her in a trolley." Marcus wasn't at home when Alexandra's father arrived. He had taken the family dogs for a walk. Alexandra's father immediately called emergency services, and police quickly located and arrested Marcus. Upon arrest, he immediately confessed to murdering Alexandra. When asked why he killed her, I say, my voice heavy, Marcus told officers he was a narcissist who was unable to feel empathy. He provided details about the crime with a detachment that investigating officers found deeply disturbing. Police located Alexandra's body within hours, exactly where Marcus had indicated. The Christmas Eve discovery cast a pall over the entire investigation team. As one officer later told me, none of us will ever look at Christmas the same way again. The investigation, when I was assigned to review this case 6 months after the initial investigation, my task wasn't to identify the perpetrator. Marcus had confessed immediately and provided details only the killer could know. My role was to examine whether systemic failures had contributed to Alexandra's death and whether justice had been properly served. The first question that haunted me, I tell you, was whether this tragedy could have been prevented. And the more I dug into Marcus's history, the more convinced I became that the answer was yes. My review of Marcus's background revealed a pattern of escalating behavior that had repeatedly come to the attention of authorities but had never been adequately addressed. His 2009 caution for assaulting a girlfriend should have been a red flag. His 2014 assault on his brother demonstrated a continued pattern of violence, but most significantly, his conviction just 3 weeks before meeting Alexandra should have resulted in more substantial intervention. I obtained the court records from Marcus's Bristol Crown Court appearance, I explained. What I found was deeply troubling. The judge had access to psychiatric evaluations in which Marcus openly discussed fantasies about killing women. The threats he had made against his girlfriend's sister were specific and graphic, and yet he received only a 9-month suspended sentence. I interviewed the psychiatrist who had evaluated Marcus prior to that sentencing. Dr. Harmon explained the rationale. We assessed that Marcus fell into the category of individuals who verbalize threats but are unlikely to act on them. Statistically, only about 3 of those who make violent threats actually carry them out. Statistics provide cold comfort to Alexandra's family, I say bitterly. What good is a 97 probability of safety when your daughter falls into the deadly 3? My investigation also looked into the digital aspects of the case. Marcus had created an elaborate online persona with social media accounts dating back several years. He maintained his ordinary decent human blog with regular posts that painted him as thoughtful and compassionate. He had even created fake client testimonials for his non-existent legal practice. In today's world, I point out, it's become increasingly easy to fabricate an entire identity. Think about your own online presence. How much of it could be verified by someone who hasn't met you in person? For Alexandra, Marcus's digital footprint seemed legitimate enough that she felt comfortable meeting him. I also examined the security measures in place at the Millbrook Manor Hotel. The establishment had cameras in public areas, but none in hallways near guest rooms. The service exit Marcus used to remove Alexandra's body had no camera coverage at all. Staff training for recognizing potentially dangerous situations was minimal. When I interviewed hotel staff, I continue, the night receptionist expressed regret that she hadn't recognized any warning signs. They just looked like any other drunk couple getting a room, she told me. I see that kind of thing every weekend. The forensic examination provided the most complete picture of Alexandra's final hours. The medical examiner determined that she died from manual strangulation with sufficient force to break the hyoid bone in her neck. Toxicology reports showed her blood alcohol level was approximately twice the legal driving limit. There were defensive wounds on her hands and forearms, contradicting Marcus's claim that she didn't even fight. Alexandra did fight for her life, I say firmly. The evidence tells us that. She struggled. She tried to survive. But against a determined attacker in a confined space, her chances were slim. Perhaps the most disturbing element of the investigation was examining Marcus's phone. The device contained not only the photos he had taken of Alexandra after her death, but also draft messages to other women from dating sites, suggesting he planned to continue dating after the murder. I want you to consider this for a moment, I say. If Alexandra's friends hadn't been so persistent, if her father hadn't confronted Marcus's parents so quickly, how many other women might have met this man? How many other families might be grieving now? The investigation also revealed that in the 3 weeks between his court appearance for threatening to kill his girlfriend's sister and meeting Alexandra, Marcus had gone on dates with 4 other women. All 4 later told police they had found him intense or odd, but had written off these feelings as first date nervousness. How often do we ignore our instincts? I ask. How often do we dismiss that little voice of concern because we don't want to appear rude or paranoid? Alexandra's case reminds us that sometimes that voice of caution is trying to save our lives. The aftermath, Marcus Bennett's trial at Winchester Crown Court, was brief by most standards. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including his own confession and the photographic evidence from his phone, he pleaded guilty to murdering Alexandra, sexually assaulting her, and taking photographs of her body. The courtroom was packed with Alexandra's family and friends, I recall. I've witnessed many trials over my career, but the grief that filled that room was palpable. It hung in the air like a physical presence. Despite his guilty plea, Marcus demonstrated no genuine remorse. He attempted to claim that Alexandra's death had occurred during a consensual sex game that went too far, an account that forensic evidence completely contradicted. This false narrative inflicted additional pain on Alexandra's already devastated family. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, I explained, Marcus simply stated, "I am a monster." It was perhaps the only honest statement he made throughout the proceedings. The judge sentenced Marcus to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 26 years before parole consideration. In his sentencing remarks, he called Marcus a psychopath and expressed doubt that he would ever be safe to release given the danger he posed to women. Was this justice? I ask. 26 years for a life full of promise? For the Christmas mornings Alexandra will never see? For the children she'll never have? For the students she'll never teach? There's no sentence that can truly balance that scale. For Alexandra's family, the conclusion of the trial brought no closure, only the painful beginning of life without her. Her mother's victim impact statement captured their bottomless grief. I'm grieving for my beautiful daughter, for the happy child she was, for the lively, beautiful, noisy teenager, for the lovely young adult, and mostly for the woman I'll never know. Her father, addressing Marcus directly in court, said, "On the internet, you said you're an ordinary, decent person. You are ordinary, but you are not a decent person." It was a stark indictment of the gulf between Marcus's public persona and his true nature. Following any tragedy of this magnitude, I continue, there are reviews and investigations to determine what could have been done differently. But these processes often feel like bureaucratic exercises rather than genuine efforts at reform. An independent review commissioned by the National Health Service examined Marcus's mental health treatment history. The review found systemic missed opportunities and a lack of information sharing regarding Bennett's previous care. However, it ultimately concluded that the tragic death of Alexandra Reynolds could not have been predicted with a degree of certainty that would have made it possible to prevent. That conclusion, I say with undisguised frustration, represents everything wrong with how our systems respond to violent offenders. No one takes responsibility. No one is held accountable. Instead, there are vague promises to learn lessons and improve procedures. Meanwhile, another family plans a funeral instead of a future. Marcus continued to demonstrate his dangerous nature even after incarceration. 6 months into his sentence, he attacked a prison officer who refused to open a cell door, punching the man in the face and attempting to strangle him. The officer later testified, "I was thinking he was going to kill me." Marcus received an additional 3-year sentence for this assault. The system failed Alexandra at every turn, I state firmly. It failed when Marcus received only a caution for assaulting his girlfriend in 2009. It failed when he was given a suspended sentence despite making explicit threats to kill. It failed when he was released without adequate monitoring or intervention. And it continues to fail as reviews conclude that nothing could have prevented this tragedy. For the online dating industry, Alexandra's case received only fleeting attention, while some platforms introduced additional safety features and verification processes in the years following her death. The fundamental risks remain largely unchanged. Most dating sites still rely on users to exercise caution rather than implementing rigorous safety measures themselves. I want you to consider this, I say. Every time you or someone you love arranges to meet a stranger from the internet, you're taking a leap of faith. Most of the time, that leap lands safely. But sometimes, as Alexandra's case tragically demonstrates, it doesn't. The lessons. 7 years have passed since Alexandra Reynolds lost her life at the hands of a man she had just met. Her case isn't unique. Hundreds of women are killed by intimate partners or dates each year in countries around the world. But the circumstances of her death and the system failures that enabled it offer crucial lessons for all of us. The first and most important lesson I emphasize is that online personas can be meticulously crafted deceptions. Marcus Bennett created an identity designed specifically to appeal to women like Alexandra, educated, socially conscious, professionally successful. He understood exactly what would make him appear trustworthy and attractive. Think critically about the information people share online. Look for inconsistencies. Consider whether their claimed accomplishments can be verified. Be wary of those who seem too perfect or whose stories seem too impressive. The second lesson, I continue, is the vital importance of establishing safety protocols when meeting someone new. Alexandra told her friends about her date, but she didn't provide details about where they were meeting or Marcus's full name. She also wasn't fully honest with her family about her plans that evening. If you're meeting someone for the first time, consider these safety measures. Meet in a public place with plenty of other people around. Tell at least one friend or family member exactly where you're going, who you're meeting, including their full name and contact information, and when you expect to return, arrange for a friend to check in with you at designated times. Use your own transportation to and from the meeting. Stay sober enough to maintain good judgment. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The third lesson, I say, relates to our collective responsibility to take threats seriously. Marcus had explicitly threatened to kill women. He had a documented history of violence, yet the system treated these as abstract risks rather than concrete warnings. If someone in your life expresses violent thoughts or makes threats, don't dismiss them as venting or hyperbole. Report concerns to appropriate authorities, and if you're the one experiencing such thoughts, seek help immediately. The fourth lesson addresses alcohol's role in vulnerability, I explained. Alexandra's judgment was impaired by alcohol, as was Marcus's impulse control. While victims are never responsible for the crimes committed against them, reducing our vulnerability helps manage risk. Consider setting limits on alcohol consumption, especially in unfamiliar situations or with people you don't know well. Maintain awareness of your surroundings and your ability to respond to threats. Finally, I say, Alexandra's case teaches us about the importance of systemic reform. Individual safety measures matter, but they're not enough when systems designed to protect us are fundamentally broken. Advocate for better resources for mental health services, for more effective monitoring of high-risk offenders, and for dating platforms to implement more rigorous verification and safety measures. These changes won't happen without public pressure. I've investigated hundreds of cases throughout my career, I reflect, but Alexandra's story has stayed with me because it represents so many societal failures converging at once. A young woman with everything to live for, crossing paths with a predator who should never have been free to harm her. What haunts me most is the preventability. If any one of multiple system failures had been addressed, if Marcus had received appropriate mental health intervention, if his previous threats had been taken more seriously, if dating platforms had better verification processes, Alexandra might still be alive today. When I think about Alexandra, I say softly, I don't just see the victim from the case file. I see the teacher who inspired her students. I see the daughter who made her parents proud. I see the friend who always showed up when needed. I see all the potential that was violently extinguished on a cold December night. I see a young woman who, like thousands of others that week, simply went on a date with someone who sounded interesting online. As you go about your day after hearing this story, I conclude, I ask you to remember Alexandra. Remember her when you're arranging to meet someone new. Remember her when you hear someone make a violent threat. Remember her when you have the opportunity to speak up for better protections and policies. Because the greatest tragedy would be to forget the lessons her death can teach us. Moral takeaway: before I close this case file, I want to share a deeper reflection on what Alexandra's story reveals about human nature and our society. We live in an age of carefully curated personas, social media accounts, dating profiles, professional websites. These digital extensions of ourselves often represent idealized versions of who we are or who we wish to be. For most people, this curation is relatively harmless, perhaps emphasizing our best qualities while minimizing our flaws. But Marcus Bennett's case demonstrates the dark extreme of this phenomenon, the complete fabrication of character. He didn't just present his best self, he constructed an entirely fictitious identity designed specifically to gain trust. His blog posts about humanitarian concerns, his fabricated professional achievements, his carefully selected photographs, all were tools in a predator's arsenal. The moral question this raises, I say thoughtfully, is about authenticity and deception. Where is the line between putting your best foot forward and deliberate manipulation? When does impression management become fraudulent misrepresentation? In our digital world, we've created unprecedented opportunities for connection, but also for exploitation. The same technology that allows long-distance friendships to flourish and communities of shared interest to form also enables predators to access victims with disturbing ease. I believe the deeper lesson here, I continue, is about the tension between trust and skepticism. Human relationships require trust to flourish. We cannot live in constant suspicion of others, and yet blind trust, particularly with strangers, can lead us into danger. This tension is what makes cases like Alexandra's so troubling. We want to live in a world where people can meet new potential partners without fear. We want to believe that most people are essentially good, or at least not actively malevolent. And statistically, this is true. Most dates do not end in violence. But statistics offer cold comfort to victims and their families. Perhaps the most important moral reflection I suggest concerns how we value and protect vulnerable individuals versus the rights and freedoms of potential threats. Our justice system erred on the side of Marcus's freedom despite clear warning signs, with catastrophic consequences for Alexandra. How do we balance individual liberty with public safety? How do we identify and intervene with dangerous individuals before they cause harm, without overreaching into the lives of the innocent? These questions have no easy answers, but they demand our serious consideration. What I know with certainty, I say firmly, is that our current approaches are inadequate. When a man can explicitly threaten to kill women, receive minimal consequences, and then go on to fulfill that very threat weeks later, something is fundamentally broken in our system of justice and protection. As we conclude Alexandra's story, I ask you to consider your own role in creating a safer world. This isn't just about personal safety measures, though those matter. It's about our collective responsibility to take threats seriously, to support comprehensive mental health services, to hold violent offenders accountable, and to create systems that prioritize protection over convenience. If there's one thing I've learned in my decades investigating humanity's darkest moments, I say, it's that evil thrives in the gaps between services, the gaps in communication, the gaps in our attention. Alexandra fell through those gaps, as have too many others. Let her memory inspire us to close those gaps. One responsible action, one policy change, one cultural shift at a time. Closing statement. As we come to the end of Alexandra's story, I find myself thinking about Christmas Eve, not just the one in 2015 when she lost her life, but all the Christmas Eve since. For her family, that date will forever be marked not by anticipation and joy, but by an anniversary of unimaginable loss. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Some it merely teaches us to carry. If you found value in Alexandra's story, I say, looking directly at you, I ask you to share it with someone you care about, not to frighten them, but to protect them. Knowledge, awareness, and caution are powerful shields against those who would do harm. The work I do investigating these cases takes a toll. Each file represents not just a crime, but a life interrupted, a family forever changed. I share these stories not for sensation, but for prevention, so that perhaps one day there will be fewer cases like Alexandra's to investigate. If you want to hear more true crime cases from my files, subscribe to the Shernan YouTube channel. Each case I share contains important lessons that might one day save a life, perhaps even your own or someone you love. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that the greatest tool against those who would do harm is a community that refuses to look away. I've been Detective James Shernan. thank you for listening to Alexandra's story. This has been Behind the Smile, the Alexandra Reynolds case from the Unsolved Case Files of Detective Shernan.